Hi, I'm Stu from Hive Mind Automation and welcome to the Hive. In this video, we'll be taking a look at this Shelly Dimmer. We'll take a look at the outside of the box, what's in the box, and how to wire it up. So while I roll the intro, why don't you take a moment to subscribe, and if you hit the bell icon, you'll get notified when I release new videos each week. While you're at it, if you like what I do here and you want to support the channel, there's affiliate links in the video description to a bunch of different home automation gadgets that I've reviewed in the past, and other ways to support the channel, like signing up for NordVPN using my affiliate link or supporting the channel directly through my Buy Me a Coffee link. With all of that out of the way, let's get started. So since I started my smart home journey several years ago, I've been hearing all about these Shellys all over the place. And especially when I started playing around with Tasmoda, because a lot of people apparently flash these Shellys with Tasmoda to then get better control. But now the Shelly integration with Home Assistant is apparently a whole lot better, so flashing is apparently no longer necessary. I also recently had a request on one of my videos to cover the Shellys, so here's my first video in what is a yet to be determined number of videos on Shelly devices. I picked up an assortment of 4 Shellys from Scorptech. This Shelly Dimmer was $59. I also picked up a Shelly 1 PM for $33, a Shelly 1 for $20, and a Shelly 1 Plus for $39. I'll be covering off the Shelly 1 PM in its own separate video, and the Shelly 1 and Shelly 1 Plus in another separate video. So get subscribed if you want to see those. Now, since ordering the Shellys, I've been looking around at other Shelly gadgets, and to be honest, I'm blown away by the range. The Shelly Pro range of DIN rail mounted gadgets especially caught my eye as a way to add smarts right into your switchboard or meter box. There's also other accessories like light bulbs, gas sensors, smoke detectors, buttons, and smart plugs, so there's clearly a lot more to the Shelly ecosystem than I'd initially thought. I definitely want to see if I can get some of the Shelly Pros in, if I can find them in Australia, and I'll be sure to do a video if and when I do. As I said before though, for now we're going to focus on this Shelly Dimmer. Now, one of the things that's recently become rather compelling about the Shelly units is that they come with a certificate of conformity, meaning that they can be installed in Australian homes in fixed wiring by a qualified electrician, that is. So let's start by taking a look around the box, and it's a fairly minimal box. It's only 65 by 65 by 25 millimeters thereabouts, and on top we see we've got Shelly Dimmer 2. We've got ×1. I'm assuming that just means that there's only one of them. It's a Wi-Fi dimmer. We've got a graphical representation of the dimming, and we've got www.shelly.cloud there. Around the sides, we've got, again, Shelly Dimmer 2, make IoT simple, and designed and developed in the EU. On this side, we've got dimming up to 230 watts, 110 to 120 volts at 50 or 60 hertz AC. We've got temperature protection, Wi-Fi 2.4 gigahertz, and open source, intelligent on and off, embedded web server, SSL connectivity, and it says the cloud service is for remote access services and backup. On the back, we've got a barcode, Shelly Dimmer 2X1. This sticker here is the number of the certificate of conformity, and copyright from the manufacturer. And lastly, download the app using the QR code and the address of the manufacturer there. And on the bottom, complies with EU standards. So there's not a whole lot around the box. Let's see what's in the box. So I'll just slip this spudger in here and lift up there, and it says the user guide is under the device, so that's helpful. We'll open up there and we've got a QR code to join the Facebook support group, and there's an email address, support@shelly.cloud and shelly.cloud for their website. And then we've got the unit itself, and if we take a look, we've got the sticker here again that shows the certificate of conformity number. We'll take a closer look at the device in a minute. I'll just pop that out and to the side for now. We'll take out this EVA foam. Underneath here, we've got some installation instructions and a quick start guide for setting up the app. Over to the unit itself, and there's not a whole lot really to look at here. On the bottom, we've got a little compliant mechanism here that we can press down on, and that pushes a tactile switch underneath to reset the unit. And there's a header here which is used for flashing the ESP that's inside here. There's not a lot around the sides. We've got our nice screw down terminals on the front edge there. And on the top, we can see we've got our markings. It's a Shelly Dimmer 2, 0.1 to 1.1 amps, 110 to 240 volts. There's plus minus 10 there. 50 to 60 hertz AC, switch inputs up to 230 volts AC, and we're on shelly.cloud. There's some warnings, some compliance information here as well. The labeled terminals here, we've got switch 1 and switch 2, 3 live terminals, a neutral terminal, and an output terminal here. And that'll start to make sense when we do wire it up. Now, obviously, this little sticker here is possibly the most important thing for my Australian viewers, because that is the number of the certificate of conformity, which allows you to actually wire this into the fixed wiring in your home. I do think it's pretty cool that Shelly have exposed the header on the bottom here so that you can flash it with custom firmware. I think that indicates that the manufacturer is pretty on board with the concept of the open home. Now, before we wire this thing up, from the 11th to the 13th of March 2023, I will be at the Train and Hobby Show at Sandown Racecourse and Entertainment Centre in Melbourne's southeast. The Train and Hobby Show showcases the best hobbies in Australia, from model railways, ham radio and electronics, radio-controlled models, makers and arts and crafts, and this year, for the very first time, the Train and Hobby Show is adding computing and home automation into the mix. I will be at the Train and Hobby Show for all 3 days, and I'll have some giveaways of stickers, and we'll be demonstrating some gadgets like light bulbs, smart switches, and more. We'll have some basic automations set up to showcase some simple automations that you can do in your own home, and I'll have some Raspberry Pis showing off my Grafana dashboard for energy and environmental monitoring that I've got in place here in my home. So if you're in Melbourne from the 11th to the 13th of March 2023, come on down to Sandown Racecourse and say hello. Get your tickets today at trainandhobbyshow.com.au. That's trainandhobbyshow.com.au. Now, back to the Shelly. So before we get into wiring this thing up, I do need to make a disclaimer. Do not try this at home. This video is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. We're working with mains electricity here, which is very dangerous, and I'm performing this in an isolated lab environment, and I'll be taking several safety precautions. While the Shelly might be approved for fixed wiring, it must be installed by a qualified electrical contractor. Here in Australia, it is illegal to perform your own fixed wiring in your house. Not only that, it's dangerous. Mains electricity can kill you, and faulty wiring can cause fires. If you intend to purchase Shellys and have them installed in your home, insist on a certificate of electrical safety from your electrician to keep your insurance company from leaving you high and dry in the hopefully very unlikely event of fire. You have been warned. So for the purposes of testing these Shellys out, I have built myself this little test board. It just plugs into mains power using this standard wall plug here, and it's running into this safety switch over here for a little bit of extra protection. Out of the safety switch on the neutral side, we just come over to this Wago connector, and then from this Wago connector into the neutral side of the load, which is this light bulb. On the live side, we come out of the safety switch into this Wago connector, and then out of the Wago connector into this standard architrave style light switch. And then out of the light switch, we go into this Wago connector, and then from this Wago connector into the load again, which again is this light bulb. The way I've wired this up should make a fair bit more sense once we wire the Shelly in. Just to demonstrate how this works, as it stands right now, I'll plug this into power. I will turn the safety switch on, and we can just turn the electricity on, and we get light as we normally would when we turn on the switch. Now, for a little extra safety to make sure that I don't zap myself while we are testing this, I've got my trusty AC detector here, and if I go to the supply here, you can see that that is beeping and flashing. That means that there is AC power in these lines. If I turn the safety switch off, we now get no more flashing and beeping, so I know that I'm safe to actually work with these live wires here. So just to be extra safe, I'm going to unplug the supply as well, so that that is here, and now we will wire the Shelly into the circuit. So the first thing we need to do is supply power to the Shelly. So I'm going to start with the neutral side. I'm going to take this pigtail that I've created and put that into this Wago connector, and then over on the Shelly itself, we will put this bootlace ferrule into the neutral terminal and screw that down nice and firmly. And there we are, that is done. For the live side, I'm going to take this pigtail that I've created with a bootlace connector and just put that into the supply side, and I will put this into one of the live terminals here, and we'll screw that down. Now, theoretically, this would work just as is, but obviously it's not going to do anything because we haven't wired up the output. So I'm going to take the live from our load here and put that into the output terminal on the Shelly. And with the live from the load into the output terminal on the Shelly, we'll screw that down, and that is nice and firmly in there. Now again, we could energize this circuit and everything would work, and it would be fine. We'd be able to control it with the app. But what we can in fact do here is I will take the output from our light switch, and I'll just clean that up a little bit, and I'm going to put that into the switch 1 terminal on the Shelly, and I will tighten that down nice and firmly. So now we have the switched live coming out of the light switch going into the switch 1 input on the Shelly itself, and so that is going to signal to the Shelly that we can turn the light on or off, and we'll take a look at some settings in the app a little bit later for that. And this is particularly good if you have, say, antique light switches in maybe an older home, so you don't have to necessarily replace your older light switches with new ones and potentially spoil the look of a restoration, but still have the smart functionality. So that is now wired up to my satisfaction. We've got live and neutral into the supply side. We've got the output to the light itself. We haven't actually changed anything for the load in terms of the neutral. That's all the same. So what we can do now is I can plug in the power here, and I will energize the circuit. And we just saw a very brief flash from the light bulb and it turned itself off again. And now if I flick the architrave switch, the light comes on, and if I flick it off, the light goes off. With everything wired up, we should now be able to pair the Shelly to the app. So I will open up the Shelly app, which I downloaded from the App Store. I will go into the test room that I set up earlier, and I'm going to tap Add to add a device. I've already predefined my Wi-Fi as HiveMind IoT and the Wi-Fi password. So we'll tap next, and now we're being asked to include new devices in the Wi-Fi network. We can add via Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or barcode scan. I'm going to leave it at Wi-Fi and scroll down, and I want to choose Dimmer 2, which is what I have here, and it's searching for the device. It's asking me to join a Wi-Fi network, which is Shelly Dimmer 2, and then the serial number of the device. I'll tap join, and it's searching for the device now. Okay, so add device name, Shelly Dimmer 2. I'll tap next. We'll put it in the test room. I'll tap next, and we'll just leave the image alone. You can upload an image if you want. I'm just not going to worry too much. We'll just tap done. So with the Shelly Dimmer 2, it says pending connection. And now it has shown up. It's got 0 watts and 0% brightness. If I drill in, we should be able to tap the power button, and it took a moment there, but the light has turned on, and I can grab the dimmer, and it's dimming there quite okay. At 2% it doesn't do much, 18% it's okay. At 100%, I might just go and grab a different bulb to demonstrate this a bit better. So I'll turn the power off. Okay, so I've just swapped out to a different bulb that seems to react a bit better to being dimmed. So I'll pull that down to 50%. And it is strobing a little bit, but not too bad. It does strobe a fair bit down below 20%. It starts to get quite stroby around 15, and then below about 10%, it just doesn't work at all. So it's probably not useful for these particular LEDs, but if you were just using regular incandescent bulbs or halogens, this would work perfectly fine. It is showing a consumption of 0 watts at 100%. That's obviously not going to be correct, but that's quite all right, and that's just updated to 4.6 watts. Again, I don't think that's correct with this particular bulb. There's not really a whole lot to mention here. It's relatively responsive, although it can occasionally freeze a little bit and take a moment to update. But if I turn off there and turn on here, with the light switch it turns on, and if I turn the light switch off, the light turns off. Now, if I turn on with the light switch, I noticed in testing that it doesn't seem to update the app for a few seconds. So it does take a moment to update, but that is not really a deal breaker. And if I drill into the settings here, we can see we've got a whole bunch of extra settings. So we can put a timer in here to auto off when it's been turned on, or auto on when it's been turned off. We can create a schedule, so choose weekdays, choose time intervals, whether it's sunrise, sunset, etc. Choose an action and a brightness value, and set a duration for that transition to occur over. We can set up a night mode, so enable night mode between these hours. We can set it so that it comes on at a predefined percentage, which is quite nice. We've got IO actions, and that allows us to define some webhook URLs. So what we can do here is define this URL so that when something happens on the device, it will then go and hit that web URL and potentially trigger webhooks within your smart home automation, such as Home Assistant. For internet, we can define Wi-Fi 1 We can also define Wi-Fi 2 as a backup Wi-Fi there in case Wi-Fi 1 fails. When it's in access point mode, this is the SSID and the password that it will have, and you can change that to whatever you need. You can restrict the login to the web interface with a username and password. For the cloud service, you can enable connectivity to the cloud that allows you to control remotely, receive notifications and updates about the devices. There's some application settings for the consumption calculation where you can exclude from the total room consumption or exclude from total account consumption. You can enable or disable a pin lock for this device. You can sync the device name with the device provided in the app. Input state display, you can add an input state identifier to the power button. So at the moment the input is turned on. If I turn that off, that might update in a moment, but you can tick that box and it'll tell you whether the input state is on or off. I see it's updated to input is turned off. And we can exclude it from the event log to disable event log reports for this device. There's sharing. You can share the device to another user as well. And then in settings, there's a whole bunch of extra stuff. So eco mode for the device to consume less energy and run at a lower temperature, and it will reboot when you disable or enable that function. There's power on default, so you can either have the device default to a power state of on or off when power gets restored, and you can also have it restored to the last mode. Or you've got the switch mode, which operates according to the state of the switch that is connected to the device. Inside button type, we've got different button types. So you can have one button mode where the dimmer is controlled with a single switch. Dual button mode, so we mentioned before that there is SW1 and SW2 inputs on here. So you can actually have two different switches inputting there. And I believe that you can use a dimmer switch to control this as well, and that would work theoretically. I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't have a dimmer switch to test out. You can have a toggle switch, which is what we've got set up at the moment. So when the switch is on, the power is on. When the switch is off, the power is off. There's an edge switch. I'm not sure what an edge switch means. There's detached, which means that the switch doesn't control the dimmer output. There's an activation switch, which you can use with a motion sensor where an input turns it on, and then there's an auto off timer that gets reset when the on turns on. And you can also swap the inputs, which I assume means swapping the switch 1 and switch 2. There's dimmer calibration, where you can auto detect the type of load during calibration. And if you are using a bypass where you don't have neutral connected to the Shelly, I've already done a calibration. I can delete that calibration and rerun it if I like. There's button debounce. So if you were just using a momentary button, you can adjust the input sensitivity so that it ignores any second button presses within 80 milliseconds there, between 80 and 200. There's a default transition time of between 0 and 5,000 milliseconds. You can change that from the default of 1,000. The button's fade rate speed, you can change that from between 1 and 5. The default is 3. I don't know what that means. The minimum brightness, you can set a minimum brightness between 0 and 50. For example, with this switch we saw before when we were testing the brightness, it doesn't really work below 10. So we might want to set that up. There's an anti-flickering debounce. I'm not 100% sure what that does, but we've got between 50 and 150 milliseconds, and that is set to 100. There's a warm-up function, so some light bulbs need more energy to wake up when the brightness is below 10%, and you can create a brightness and time that will create an initial impulse. So you can set a warm-up brightness between 10 and 100%, and you can then set up a warm-up time between 20 and 1,000 milliseconds. There's LED status disable, so you can disable the Wi-Fi status LED on the unit. Firmware update. And there is one available, which will run a bit later on. We've got geolocation and time zone, and will automatically detect the time zone and geolocation. We can change the current device name, and that will reflect on the device name in the application if the sync name application setting is enabled. We can change the channel name. We've got factory reset, so we can reset it back to factory settings. We've got device reboot and device info here. I'll go back to firmware update, and I'm going to tap update there, and it says attention, during or after the update your device may change its status or send invalid values. Do not update if you do not have physical access to the device or devices it controls. I'm going to tap update. Now this failed a couple of times when I tried it last time, so I'll tap update. And it's failed to update the device. It's saying it can't connect to the internet. So I will deal with the update later, but for now we will back out and we can power the unit on, power the unit off. Everything is working fine using the app. Okay, so with the native app out of the way, let's take a look at getting this into Home Assistant. But before we do that, I'm going to open up another window in my Microsoft Edge here. And I'm just going to type in 192.168.1.80 and then hit return. And this is going to take me to the Shelly Dimmer 2. And we see we've got channel 1, and that'll be the channel name that we saw in a moment ago. It's showing us that we've got 5 watts and we've got at 100%. We can dim the light through this web interface here, and that is working. And we can turn the light off or on using the web interface. We can play with the timer. We can play with the weekly schedule, night mode, internet and security, actions, and settings here. So the web interface gives us a lot of the same controls that we had in the app there that we saw before. That is quite helpful because you can then modify those using a desktop rather than trying to type on a phone keyboard. I'll head back over to Home Assistant now, and I'm going to scroll down on the left-hand side and go to Settings and Devices and Services. So now on the Devices and Services page in Home Assistant, we would normally get an auto discovery in here, but I have broken that. So what I'm going to do is click on Add Integration in the bottom right-hand corner here, and I'm going to search for Shelly. And we will click on Shelly here, and it's going to ask us for the address. 192.168.1.80 is the IP address. I'll click Submit on that, and it has found the Shelly Dimmer. I'm going to add that to my test area in Home Assistant here, and we'll tap Finish here, and I'll just zoom in so that we can see what's happening again. And so now we've got Shelly Dimmer and 1 device and 14 entities. I'll click on 1 device and we've got the Shelly Dimmer here, and I can turn the light off, and if we drill in we can turn it back on. We can change the brightness value here, and all of it is responding fairly well. I am experiencing a bit of slowness on my laptop here, but it's responding fairly well. So additionally here, we've got some sensors that are not shown. We've got some configuration entities that are not shown, and some diagnostic entities that are not shown. So let's expand the sensors that are not shown. So we see channel 1 input and energy and power. So if I drill into channel 1 input and then advanced settings, I can enable that, and then we can update that as well. And energy and power are things that I would probably want access to as well, so I will update those. In the configuration section, if we expand the entities that are not shown, we have beta firmware update and firmware update. And in the diagnostic, the 4 entities not shown are cloud, device temperature, RSSI, so the signal integrity, and the uptime. So there's some interesting diagnostic information and configuration information that you can gain in Home Assistant and help to automate some of these different processes here. It's gone unavailable while it updates some of the things in here. So energy, it's 0.0 kilowatt hours. The power may update in a minute. We've got channel 1 input there. If I turn on the switch, we see that channel 1 input has updated to on, and if I turn the switch off, it's updated to off, and the light has turned off as well. So it is working as expected. So you could reasonably use this channel 1 input to then trigger other automations in your smart home with Home Assistant as well. So that's the Shelly Dimmer. I really like that you can still use a regular light switch to trigger state changes on these. Like in my previous video about adding buttons back in, everyone knows how to use a light switch, so you don't lose the original functionality of the light switch, but you still gain some smart functionality. The dimming function seems to work pretty well, and it does mean that you can get a smart dimmer without needing to rewire your whole house or replace all of your light fittings or bulbs. You can just wire one of these Shelly dimmers in behind your existing light switch or dimmer switch, and it should work perfectly fine. At $59, it's hardly going to break the bank, though you will then likely need to spend another $100 or so to get a Sparky in to wire it up. As you saw, the integration with Home Assistant was a cakewalk, and it seems to be very, very reliable in that integration as well. It's quite responsive, and it seems to work pretty well. In the next video, we'll be taking a look at the Shelly One PM, which includes power monitoring. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. That's all we have for this video, and I do hope that it helped you in your home automation journey. Be sure to drop a comment down below with how you would use the Shelly Dimmer in your smart home and ideas for videos that you would like to see me cover in the future. Don't forget to follow Hive Mind Automation on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button down below to give it a like. If you're not already subscribed, please consider subscribing now. And while you're at it, if you hit the bell icon, you'll receive a notification when I release new videos, and that's normally each week. Lastly, if you enjoy what I do here and you want to help to support the channel, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description down below. Contributions that you make through Buy Me a Coffee get put towards making more and hopefully better content for you to enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Stu from Hive Mind Automation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.